What's going on, everyone? Riku-san, one, the only one here, and I'm back with another video. And not just any video, this is going to be my first review. So previously on this channel I only did impression videos. This one is going to be my first review, and it's going to be on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5, Vento Aureo, or the Japanese name Ogan no Kaze. And Ogan no Kaze is the Japanese name. It translated over to what we know it as Vento Aureo is Italian. That's like the main thing of this arc. Well, this part of JoJo's is it's Italian. It takes place in France, as far as I know. And Vento Aureo is French. That means, if you translate that to English, it would mean golden wind. So I'm wondering, because I know certain places where this manga came out is actually called Golden Wind, or Gold Wind, I think. Golden Wind or Golden, one of those two. But I think when we actually get the anime, if we do get an anime for Part 5, it most likely will go by its Italian name, which is Vento Aureo, because I think that's what Araki would probably want. But anyway, Part 5. So before I hop into Part 5, I want to explain how I'm going to do my reviews. So basically for my reviews, first I want to say that when it comes to reviews, I feel that when you do a review, there's no way you can, well, that you can, but it's in my opinion, it's not really, I don't really want to do a review that's just 100% critical with no bias behind it. And you know, in actuality, that's what a review should be. You should be as unbiased as possible, and you should be as critical and fair as possible when it comes to a review. And that's kind of why I don't really like doing actual reviews on each episode, because I mean, for me, critiquing isn't really one of the things that I enjoy doing when it comes to something I like. So when it comes to my reviews, I will be critiquing it to an extent, but I can't deny that there might be a little bit of bias here and there when it comes to how I feel about it, because at the end of the day, when you look at all types of reviews for, you know, one specific thing, they're all different. And the reason for that is because people have different opinions. And in his opinion, this is good. In his opinion, this is bad. Even though both of them are critiquing it in their opinion, you know, at the end of the day, if they don't reach the same conclusion, you know, something, you know, it's their opinion at the end of the day, which why he may think this is good and he critiqued it, and why he explained it's good, and another person might critique it and think it's bad. So, you know, some people out here might think that, oh yeah, I can critique it with, you know, 100% unbiased. It's good for you, but when it comes to me, I'm just gonna keep it real, you know. I know that there's some sort of bias behind it, you know, but that's basically what I want to say as far as my reviews. So I can't promise that I will be 100% critical when it comes to when I score certain sections of a series. So now that that's out of the way, I want to say the specific categories that I want to talk about when it comes to my reviews. So when it comes to manga reviews, I want to talk about 5 different categories. And those 5 consist of story, art, sound, characters, enjoyment, and then my overall thoughts. So story, well, okay, out of the 5 categories that I named, art and enjoyment are obviously the two that are just those are extremely opinionated, because when it comes to the 5 categories that I've, you know, chosen for reviewing a manga series, it's straight off of my anime list. You know, these are the same categories that they use, and I feel that these are good categories to review series on. You know, story, art, sound, characters, enjoyment, and overall. But at the end, like I said, you have to try and be, you know, subjective. Or no, sorry, objective. You have to be as objective as possible when it comes to doing your review. Subjective? I can't remember which one. But you get my point. You got to be as critical as possible. And you can't do that with the categories of art and enjoyment, because art is looked at as something as, you know, that's extremely opinionated. Something that may look like crap to someone may look like a masterpiece to someone else, you know? So, when it comes to enjoyment, obviously, enjoyment is going to vary from every different person, so that's opinionated. There's nothing I can do about that category. Same thing to an extent when it comes to art, so I want to say those two things. But those are the 5 categories. When it comes to, if I do review anime in the future, which I do intend to, sound is going to be another category. If I said that previously, I didn't mean to, but for anime it's going to be story, art/animation, sound, characters, and enjoyment. And then for manga it's going to be story, art, characters, and enjoyment. So that's what I meant to say if I made a mistake. But basically, yeah, those are the categories. And when it comes to rating, I want to do it out of 10. So 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. And when I rate it out of 10, that doesn't necessarily mean because I gave it a 10 out of 10 in this certain category, it doesn't mean I think it's perfect. That just means, for me, that means it has reached the pinnacle of satisfaction that I've gotten out of that category. So there may be flaws in that category, but the pros in that specific category outweigh them so much that it still reached a 10 to me. It's kind of like filling up a meter, and that meter has reached to the top. That's basically how I look at it. Because, in my opinion, nothing's perfect. So that's how I'm gonna do it. So if I do give something a 10, gotta take that into consideration. So that's about it. Alright, so on to the actual review. Alright, so the story for part 5, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Vento Aureo. The premise for JoJo's, it takes place, I think a couple of months after part 4. So as far as all of the, time skips that we get from, each part, from part 1 to part 2, part 2 to part 3, part 3 to part 4, this one I think has the shortest time skip out of all of them, which is, like I said, only, as far as I remember, I think it's only about 6 months. So takes place, no character had a chance to age or anything like that, which is a first we've seen in JoJo's, because we're always used to seeing, how the characters age. When it comes to this one, it's only been 6 months. So that's interesting. And the premise follows, obviously, a new JoJo's character, and his name goes by Giorno Giovanna. Yes, I rolled the R because this is Italian, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm rolling the R on his Italian name. Giorno Giovanna is he's an interesting character as far as his his origin, his background, because actually I'm going to talk about Giorno some more in the character section, but he's the main character, and he's related to Dio Brando. This is Dio Brando's son, which came to a surprise to me, because this is the that would technically make him like the grandfather of like Joseph or second. It was I thought that Josuke messed up the family tree when he came into play. Giorno, he wow, because he just, the time difference in him, and that Dio Brando, his body is technically Jonathan's, and it's just so weird to see that Dio actually had a son, and yeah, we're following him. So now we're following this character Giorno, and he has a he starts off kind of like a thug, because we start off following Koichi Hirose, the one of the characters from part 4, and he's on a mission that Jotaro sent him on to find Giorno. Basically, the premise for it is basically Koichi and the other part 3 characters, they kind of hit the back burner, and we follow Giorno and his group. So we're getting completely new characters, and it's about the main character trying to take over this new mafia antagonist group that is the threat of this part. And it's pretty straightforward, they explain everything inside there, and there's nothing really deep when it comes to the pathway that they have to take. They basically lay it out to us, where Giorno and his crew, they have to take over this mafia. So it was when you read the premise, it's kind of like it sounds kind of dull, but when you get in there and we get all the characters and whatnot, it's actually pretty entertaining. If there's one thing that's actually not good about this arc not this arc, but this part, is the pacing. The pacing felt kind of like iffy when it came to certain arcs in part 5. One specific arc I thought that just dragged on a little bit was called Green Day and Oasis. That one dragged on a bit. I was honestly losing a little bit of interest in part 5 when it came to that arc, but it did have some good arcs, some really good arcs, like was an arc called The Great Dreadful, or The Grateful Dead, should I say. It's called The Grateful Dead, and that's the one where they're on the train. That was a really good arc. And then there was another arc called White Album. That was a really good one too. So that's some really good arcs inside there, and some good stan enemies that they had to fight. But I think that Green Day and Oasis arc, man, that one lasted just a bit too long, and it was, in my opinion, it was pretty boring. But the story, if there's one thing about part 5 that I think it hit home the most, is we finally get the origin of stans, and they explain basically where there was this meteorite that hit Earth, and this meteorite was giving people weird effects and abilities. And basically there was this guy a long time ago that took these meteorites and turned them into the arrows that we know of. And obviously when these arrows hit you, you get a stan. It was some really trippy stuff. It was weird how Araki took this long to explain how stans came to be. So I felt kind of like, I don't know how I feel about basically it's a meteorite from outer space that basically this all happened, and this was like hundreds of years ago where these arrows were created, and then arrows were passed down to this person, to that person, and it just got out of hand. But even though it was kind of weird, it was extremely interesting, because at least he was able to tell us. So I didn't think we were ever going to get that type of information before part 3. I didn't think he was ever going to explain that. But we basically get it completely explained in this part. At the end of this part, I don't think there's anything we don't know about stans. So I'm glad that we got that out the way as far as stans. And as far as I see in future parts, stans are still here to stay. But the fact that we know the origin behind stans now, I thought that was probably the best thing from a story standpoint that part 5 brought to the table. So as far as this part, this segment, this category, I give the story an 8 out of 10, or an 8.5 out of 10 to be exact. That was a very good story. Couldn't give it any higher than an 8.5 because I felt the pacing was kind of iffy, and in comparison to previous arcs, I felt the execution behind the stories that they brought to the table, I thought it was a lot better than this one. But this one wasn't bad at all. So, on to the next category. Alright, the next category I want to talk about is art. The art in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5. The art I thought was very good, but I do want to talk about the art style previously in previous parts before I actually talk about the art style in Part 5. Specifically Part 4. At the beginning of Part 4, we had a rough and cool art style. And I realized this Araki, over the time, since Part 1 all the way to Part 8, his art style has definitely changed. And it has changed a lot. And during Part 4, like 75% of the way through Part 4, well actually 3 times during Part 4, or 2 times should I say, 2 times during Part 4, the art style changed in Part 4, where the first like part of Part 4, it was like I said, it was rough and this cool like kind of like Fist of the North Star type of art style. And then the middle part of Part 4 had this like this laid back cartoony kind of smooth art style to it. And then the third section of Part 4 had this like flamboyant art style to it. I might put up some screenshots as far as how the change in art style as far as Part 4 was concerned. And I like the first art style. The second one was okay too, but the third one I wasn't a fan of the whole flamboyant art style that it ended up being. And since that was like the last art style Part 4 had, moving on to Part 5, that's what it seemed to move over to, that flamboyant art style. And we all know that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it already has this like flamboyant atmosphere to it when it comes to the character designs, the poses that they do, how the stance may look sometimes. There's a lot of flamboyant, essence in there. But Part 5 just takes it to a whole new level of just flamboyant. And wasn't necessarily a fan of that. So when you look at, I remember when I was first getting into JoJo's and I saw how Jonathan and Joseph looked, I thought they looked a little bit flamboyant, just a little bit. Especially Joseph, with the whole scarf, short shirt and all that stuff. And I think Jonathan had a short shirt at one time too. But then Part 3 came and we got Jotaro. And Jotaro, he looked like a man. He looked masculine and all this other stuff. And then when we got to Part 4, same thing with Josuke to an extent. He may have had like the heart emblems and stuff on his shirt, but overall, Josuke wasn't. Josuke didn't look that flamboyant. He had little hints of it here and there, but as far as his character design, not his personality or anything. But as far as his character design, it had a little bit of flamboyant, like I said, the heart and whatnot. But how you want to take that? But we get to Part 5, and it's just to the extreme. Every single character and all of the character designs just look straight up flamboyant, and I'm not necessarily a fan of that. Another thing about the art style in Part 5 that I did not like that much was the fact that when it came to the stands and their fight scenes, so the choreography behind the stands, if you we all, if you're watching this review, you know how stand fights go in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. They're bizarre as shit. So when it came to the stand fights that I was expecting in part 5, I was expecting stuff like previous parts, and some of them were cool, like the White Album fight and Grateful Dead. But then some of them, when it came to the way Araki drew them, it was kind of hard to follow what was going on. And this happened a lot, where I just had to like stare at the panel for like, almost a minute, just trying to figure out what the hell did he just draw? Is this character getting chopped in half, or is this, especially during the King Chrism stuff, like, oh my god. It was just hard to depict what was going on during panels, because it's just, I don't know, it felt, when it came to part 5, his art, he didn't necessarily draw certain fight scenes or certain scenarios clear enough for me to understand exactly what is going on, unless I stared at it and tried to understand it for about like 45 seconds or more at one specific panel, and that kind of turned me off a bit. But I guess that's just a personal thing. I don't know if anyone else dealt with that, but I was just like, what am I looking at? And it happened quite a lot, to the point where I have to point it out. But overall, the art style's still not bad. I mean, even though it has this flamboyant character designs here and there, I still thought certain stands, they looked cool to an extent. So as far as this category, as far as art, I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. So still think it's very good. I do think when it came to previous parts, it was better, but it is what it is. So that's the end of this category. On to the next one. Alright, so next category is characters. So this one is probably going to be the biggest category that I talk about, because there's quite a few characters that I actually want to talk about when it comes to part 5. So let's start off with the main character. Excuse me. Giorno Giovanna. He is, like I said, he's an interesting character because he is the son of not only Dio Brando, but Jonathan Joestar. He has both of their DNAs inside him. He's a Joestar because he's, it was Jonathan's body that Dio Brando took over, but it's also Dio Brando's DNA inside that sperm that made Giorno. And his, you can see in his hair and all this other stuff. But even though he is Dio Brando's son, he acts nothing like him. He acts more along the lines of Jonathan when it comes to like being a gentleman and whatnot. But even to an extent, he doesn't really even act like Jonathan that much, because Jonathan, he wanted to be a true gentleman and whatnot, but he was outgoing. You could see the spunk behind Jonathan Joestar. He's one of my favorite Joestars, but you don't see that in Giorno. He has like this. He's a loyal character to his crew, but he has like this. I felt his personality was kind of like dull, honestly. He didn't really have anything that made him, in my opinion, as far as from a personality standpoint, he didn't have anything that made him that unique in comparison to all of the previous Joestars. Like I said, Jonathan, he was outgoing and he wanted to be a true gentleman. That was his thing. Joseph, when it came to Joseph, he was a comedian. He's still the funniest Joestar of all time, and he was smart. He was cunning, and that's probably everything that all of the Joestars have. They were all cunning. So, but Joseph definitely proved that he was probably the most cunning. So that's why I give him that trait. But he had his comedy and he was cunning. When it came to Jotaro was more laid back and cool. You can tell that Araki was going for his version of like Kenshiro. And then when it came to Josuke, Josuke, his whole you could say gimmick was the fact that he talked about his hair, and that's when he goes that's when he starts rating. But even when you look past that, Josuke also had he had an interesting personality also. He was this cool and calm, collected, laid back teenager, just trying to go to high school and whatnot. But when we get to Giorno, he didn't have anything. I felt he didn't have any type of like special personality trait that made me want to follow this character as much as the previous Joestars. And that's kind of sad in my opinion, because like I said, when you give us a character like Giorno, and he has Dio Brando as a father, you think, oh, this is gonna be interesting as shit. He's probably gonna be going, it's probably gonna be an asshole or something along the lines of that. We didn't get any of that. He just, like I said, in my opinion, all I saw in him was like he was loyal to his friends. He had cool strategies, but that's a part of the cunning thing that all Joestars had, and that was about it. I mean, he had some sort of like little phrase that he said around the beginning, where it was like he would say, I'll say it once again, and then he would say, whatever he would say once again. He had that going on for a while. Araki tried to make that a thing, but then eventually, like honestly, like 40% through the manga, he kind of stopped saying that phrase. I'll say it once again. He kind of stopped doing that also. So, that could have been a thing, but it ended pretty abruptly. Kind of like, that reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of Josuke when it came to his hair. Since you're here watching part 5, that means you probably already finished part 4. So part 4 spoilers obviously, and part 5 spoilers obviously. But I felt in part 4 when probably after they met Kishibe Rohan, after that incident, they didn't really focus on Josuke's hair anymore. I think we got his flashback, and then that was it. They never talked about like no enemy or mention of his hair or him raging out ever again. And this was probably like 45% of the way through the manga, where they kind of stopped mentioning Josuke's hair. So even though they stopped talking about Josuke's hair, it's still remembered as something that Josuke had. This, on the other hand, as far as this whole phrase, didn't feel that when it came to Giorno. But that's it for Giorno. I think he's probably the weakest and least interesting when it comes to all of the Joestars. Moving on to the next character I want to talk about, Bucciolati Bruno. Bucciolati is an interesting character. When I first saw him, like I said, his character design, same thing with Giorno. Both of their character designs, honestly, all of the character designs, and like I said, all of the character designs, all of them are just girly and flamboyant to me. So when I first saw Bucciolati Bruno, I was like, I don't like this guy. He looks too weird to me, But man, did he prove me wrong? He's honestly probably one of the best characters in part 5. And his stand is interesting too. But you know what? Actually, let me go back and talk about Giorno's stand for a second, because I forgot to mention his stand. Stand, gold experience. Pretty cool stand. I do like the fact that when Giorno attacks with his stand, he does Mura. So you hear Mura 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 Mura. We hear the Muras from Dio Brando. So that's cool that that they kept that. They didn't give him something new. They kept Mura, in honor of his father. But it was cool to see that Gold Experience was doing Mura. And Gold Experience is power where he can basically take any object and turn it into a living thing, and turn living things into I don't think he can turn living things into inanimate objects. I think he just can turn inanimate objects into living things. And he can also take, certain body parts or certain inanimate objects and make him a replacement for damaged body parts on himself or his friends. So it was kind of like a combination of something new, and Josuke's ability, where Josuke's ability was kind of used as like a medic stand. This one was kind of used like a medic stand also, so Gold experience was pretty cool, especially around the end where we got, you know, the whole transformation with the, when he injected himself with the arrow. This is probably the second time I saw a stand evolve. And, you know, obviously the first time was with Koichi, where he used his echoes. You know, his echoes had Echoes Act 2, and I think it had an Act 3, I can't remember. But, you know, that was the first time we saw a stand evolve, and this was the second time with, you know, the arrow. Obviously by two different methods, and I don't know if Jordan, you know, can evolve his stand on the get-go anymore. I think maybe that was just a buff, or maybe he can. We didn't really get to figure that out by the end, but it was cool. It was cool to see an evolved stand and all that stuff. But back to Bucciolati. Bucciolati's stand was, man, bizarre. Zippers. Every time he punched something, a zipper would like spawn, and he can like zip through walls and all this. So honestly, when I first saw it, I thought that shit was stupid. I thought it was just completely. I was like, zippers, really, Araki? You must be really running out of ideas. Zippers. But to my surprise, it was badass once again. Like, I can't deny it. It was zippers. I can't believe that a stand that like punches someone and like a zipper would come on their face and they would like zip it, and then like I know Bucciolati also had a certain thing he said when he punched, he would go Adi, and I think it was like, I think that translated into like farewell, I think. Adi. It was like a long word, a long French word, and it was short for Adi, and Adi meant like farewell. But every time he punched, he would go Adi, 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 Adi. And it was one time when he punched an enemy and a bunch of zippers just came on, and then he just like unzipped all of them, and all of his like, you know, body parts just separated, and it was just blood, and it was just like, wow, okay, zippers. But I was surprised how much Araki was able to do with fucking zippers. I was surprised. So once again, yeah, don't judge the stand, because man, that shit was stupid as hell. But guess what? It's one of my favorite stands, honestly. But Bucciolati Bruno, he served a really good purpose in Part 5. You know, he was throughout the entire series, he was like the leader of the crew, and he and Giorno, they had a really good they had a really cool friendship connection, but nothing too special. He is one of the characters, obviously. If you know anything about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure up to now, starting from Part 3 and moving forward, well, actually even Part 1, characters die. And Bucciolati, he got placed with like a heavy foreshadow, a heavy death flag from like pretty damn early in the series. Probably like the halfway point, he got like a major death flag. And you know, it was the fact that, you know, he stopped bleeding and all this other stuff. But man, when I first saw that he stopped bleeding, I was like, man, I know it. He's gonna die. He's gonna die. And it pissed me off because it was around the time where I was actually starting to like Bucciolati. So yeah, it sucked that he ended up dying. Like I knew it was gonna happen. We all saw it coming. If you didn't see that coming, I'm surprised, but I saw it coming. Bucciolati, like it. I know characters in this part were gonna die. A lot of them did die, and I knew Bucciolati was gonna be one of them. So it was sad that Bucciolati had to die, but he did put in a lot of work before he did. But moving on to the next character I want to talk about, Guido Mista. Guido Mista with his stand called Sex Pistols. This is another like weird stand. I can't remember what Bucciolati's stand was called, by the way. Do apologize for that. What's it called? Sticky Fingers. That's what it was called. Sticky Fingers. But yeah, that was Bucciolati's stand called Sticky Fingers, and Guido Mista's stand was called Sex Pistols. I remember when I first saw the chapter, and I saw the chapter named Sex Pistols. I was like, what the hell is Sex Pistols? Whatever, Araki. And Guido Mista, he's probably the most entertaining character when it comes to all of the characters in Part 5's crew. He was pretty funny. He was extremely entertaining, like I said, and his stand was basically these like little tiny stand guys. And as far as the video game, I saw, you know, the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Eyes of Heaven video game that's gonna come out, and these guys, they sound exactly how I thought they were gonna sound. They sound like chipmunks, and they're pretty entertaining and funny also. I think what did he got, like, I think he had 5 of them, and you know, there was Sex Pistol 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and he skipped 4 because that's something that Guido Mista can't stand. He can't stand the number 4 because he thinks it's an unlucky and evil number. He's one of those guys where, you know, in Japan, there's this myth where they don't like the number 4 and all this other stuff. And he's that character. He does not like the number 4. He doesn't name his stand after it. He started coming up with conspiracies as far as, oh, you know, there's 1 cup over here and 3 cups over there. That equals to 4. Something's bad gonna happen. He just goes insane when it comes to like the number 4, and it was pretty funny to see that. But Guido Mista, he was extremely entertaining character. He did not die, and that was cool. He did have a couple of scenes where I thought he was gonna die, and his fight during his fight with White Album, probably my favorite fight in the entire series. That was an amazing fight. But Guido Mista, probably, in my opinion, probably the best character in the entire crew. So next character I want to talk about is Naransa. Naransa Girna, I think is it? Girna, I think. I like the rolled R's. But Naransa, you would consider Naransa probably Koichi's replacement. He's looked at as, you know, he's the youngest in the crew. He's definitely ignorant, and he doesn't know a lot of stuff. And you know, him and Guido Mista are always like talking about certain things, you know, a little like fun facts, and it's pretty funny because Naransa, he seems to like always, he's extremely gullible, so he's always like just listening to all of the stupid crap that Guido Mista, you know, throws out at him. But Naransa, I actually thought Naransa had probably one of the best backstories when it came to the characters that we have in this crew. Him and another character I'm going to mention soon enough. I'm not going to talk about his backstory because this video is probably long enough already. But he had a really good backstory, and his stand, Aerosmith, was like this plane, and he can control it and, you know, shoot little like tiny little bullet pellets at the enemy and whatnot. And he also had like this scouter where he can like I think it sensed heat. It was like a heat vision radar that he had. It was like a scouter. And that was cool. But sadly, Naransa was another character that ended up biting the dust. No pun intended to Killer Queen biting the dust. But damn it, man. Naransa had to die too, apparently. At the end, I honestly felt that Naransa didn't have to die. I felt Araki killed just a bit too many characters off when it came to part 5. I felt Naransa, he just did not have to die for no reason. Damn it, man. Naransa died too at the end, and that was sad. But he was a really good character. That was another really good, interesting character. Yeah, that's Naransa. Next character is Abachio. And Abachio was, I think Abachio actually had the best backstory out of all of the characters. You know, his whole him being a police and what it stood for and how he got screwed over and all that stuff. I love that backstory. It was, honestly, I think that's probably the best backstory I read in all of JoJo's. It was Abachio's. And Abachio Leone, his stand was, man, there's a lot of stands, so forgive me if I can't remember the name of his stand, but as far as I remember, his stand could repeat time and show you, specifically what would happen if he just keeps on rewinding time. I probably have an annotation of what his stand was called, but that was an interesting stand that he had. But the fact is, out of all of the stand users in the entire crew, his stand was the only one that did not have any combat, capabilities, and he was the first to die, so that pissed me off. He died pretty damn early too. Honestly, he was like, he kind of served the purpose of what Kakyoin in part 3. If you remember how Kakyoin died, his purpose where he basically exposed Theo Brando's ability, but with the cost of his life. That's kind of what Abachio did in this part, where he ended up dying, but he was able to give his crew really good information on the main antagonist, the villain of this part. He gave his crew people really good information before he died, and it sucks that he died so early. But like I said, man, Araki killed off a lot of characters when it came to part 5. Next character I want to talk about is Trish. Trish is the first female to be a part of like an actual JoJo's crew, as far as I remember. I don't want to consider Lisa a part of like Joseph's crew. As far as Joseph's crew, the only two people I really consider a part of Joseph's crew is Joseph himself and Caesar. When it came to part 4, I don't really consider the girl with her stand was the hair. Probably have an annotation of what her name is. Forgot what her name is. But I don't consider her a part of Josuke's crew either. A part of the permanent crew. It's debatable if you want to consider her a part of the crew or not. But as far as Trish, I would consider Trish a part of the crew. She was here for a majority of the time, and she eventually got her own stand, which I think was called Spice Girl. And Spice Girl's stand was interesting. It wasn't anything super cool, but it was interesting where she can basically take any object and tell Spice, I think, did she have to touch it? I can't remember if she had to touch it or not. But she can take any object and make it like, I guess the solid state of it, she can change it and make it like bouncy or, all that stuff. It was bizarre. I'm just gonna leave it at that. It was bizarre. So, but Trish as a character, she was pretty cute. And since this was, all the character designs were the flamboyant, it worked for her since she was a female. So she was a cute one, and I felt that her and Bucciolati, I felt they had like some sort of like connection going on there, but obviously it didn't matter since Bucciolati died anyway. But Trish, we saw some character development in Trish. It was some interesting character development, because I know when she first got to the crew, she did not like any of them. She barely talked and all that stuff, and then by the end she was talking, she was getting along with Guido Mista a lot at the end. But I think that was probably because those two, there was a certain arc where everyone got their body switched and those two got their body switched, and that was a really interesting funny. I think that was the last arc actually, and yeah. By that time, she was already talking, and she was already talkative, and that definitely made her even closer to Guido Mista, I felt. Because, if you remember those final panels when the characters died, her and Guido Mista, they're really hitting it up. They're really hitting it up. But Trish, she's a good character. I liked her. She's pretty cool. I definitely like seeing more female characters in the spotlight and their stand. And gonna start reading part 6, so I'm gonna enjoy that. A few more characters I want to talk about. Fugo Panakota. Now, Fugo Panakota, he's definitely a lot of controversy when it comes to Fugo, because Fugo was the character, man. He was the character that when we first got introduced to his stand, what was his stand called? Man, can't remember right now. Can't remember. I do apologize. I probably have an annotation for that too. But his stand was crazy and interesting because when we first get introduced to it, first I think it was Abachio who was warning Giorno that stay away from this dude's stand because his stand is crazy, you know. And it really was, because it had the power to give off this type of like toxic, and I think it had like these capsules on his fist, and if those capsules broke, I think it was actually I don't think he gave off from this. It was the capsules that if they burst, they gave off a toxic mist that was like extremely dangerous. So this guy, a part of the crew, you would think that having such a powerful or dangerous stand that he would help out a lot, and he could have, but that didn't end up happening. Before I get into that, Fugo, his personality was pretty interesting. He was definitely level-headed. He was probably similar to Jordan when it came to his personality. He was really level-headed, didn't really have any outgoing traits, and he was one of the smart people in the crew. And probably just a little bit too cautious about things, because we eventually find out that after it was probably about halfway through the manga where they met the boss, and after that Fugo, they're all getting on the boat and Fugo decides not to go on the boat. He just straight pussy out on us, man. He was like, I'm not doing this anymore. You guys can go and die if you want. I'm not doing this. And he just left. And we just didn't see him anymore for the rest of the manga. And that was probably like, as far as I remember, that was probably it was either halfway through the manga or 75% of the way through the manga. He just straight up left the crew. And I was extremely disappointed in that. I was like, Araki, why would you give us such a, wasn't that good of a character, but his stand was good, and he could have helped out a lot, man. He could have helped out a lot, but it didn't matter because he dipped on us. And I think when it comes to rating this section as far as characters, that specific character, man, I personally have to take out some points when it came to that. Because as far as I remember hearing that Araki was going to he had different plans for Fugo. As far as I remember hearing, he was going to have Fugo betray the crew and then fight Fugo, but he didn't want to, as far as I heard, he didn't want to make fans hate Fugo or something like that. But I guess that goes into more of the story category. As far as that could be another excuse why I personally feel I couldn't give part 5 a 9, because like I said, it had some pacing issues as far as dragging on certain scenes and certain arcs, and certain things that Araki himself said he wanted to include into the story, as far as Fugo making a reappearance and then that never happening. So it just certain segments as far as part 5, he just never got around to it. And that sucks, because Fugo was an interesting character, and he has his own spin-off novel. And I tried to read, I'm not a novel guy, so I couldn't really get into it. Hopefully, when it comes to the anime, they take that novel and give it its own little spin-off OVA, kind of like what they're doing with Kishibe Rohan right now. They're giving him his own OVA, and I think that's based off of his spin-off. And I can't remember if his spin-off is a manga or not, but the fact is, it's a spin-off series that's focused on Kishibe Rohan, and it's getting an OVA. So hopefully, when it comes to Fugo, we get the same. Even though I heard that's not canon, I heard it's a really interesting story, and they could probably, as far as the anime only watchers, when they eventually watch part 5, they're probably gonna feel the same way as us manga readers when it comes to the disappearance of Fugo. So that OVA will probably, they might as well just go ahead and they might as well just make that spin-off. Now I won't give it its OVA. Probably can wrap it up in like, honestly, could wrap it up in about like 5 episodes or 3 or something. But that's enough about Fugo. A few more characters I want to talk about, and let's talk about the villain of part 5, Diavolo. Diavolo he's interesting. I know some people actually don't like Diavolo, and then some people actually do like Diavolo. It's really split down the middle. And I think I'm right in the middle. I kind of like Diavolo as a villain. Kind of like him as a character too, but I do feel that he was just a little bit too much like Dio Brando. But I do see, I've seen some videos on how people felt about Diavolo, and some people felt he was like the best villain ever. Some people like he was the worst villain ever because he's just a Dio Brando copy. And the reason some people call him a Dio Brando copy is probably because of the way his stand is used. And his stand is called King Crimson, as far as I remember. Yeah, King Crimson. And King Crimson's... I'm not even gonna try and explain how King Crimson's ability works, but basically it can erase time in a certain segment. And it's kind of like he's basically manipulating time. And when it comes to the villain stands, the main villain stands in JoJo's up to now, part 3, part 4, and part 5, they've all had something to do with time manipulation, where Dio Brando's own was stopping time. Kira Yoshikage's Killer Queen stand was about, reversing time and a couple of other things. And then this dude's stand is about erasing time. Or some people think it's fast forwarding time, some people think it's, at the end of the day, it's time manipulation. I'm just gonna chop it up to, he's erasing time, and he can predict time into the future, so he can, do something about it. But basically, the way he was using it was similar, extremely similar to how Dio Brando was using his stand, where they really couldn't do anything against it. Same thing you could say about Killer Queen, but that's just the time manipulation thing they had going on with the villainous stands. As far as I heard, I'm not even talking about that, but yeah, time manipulation for these villainous stands, and it's just another time manipulator when it comes to his stand. But Diavolo, his backstory was pretty interesting. His whole, he didn't want to be detected by anyone. He was trying to erase his past, and this whole arc of part 5 was basically, after Giorno and Bucciolati got into the segment of the mafia that they wanted to be a part of. It basically turned into an escort manga where they had to take Trish to the boss. And then obviously, the boss wanted to kill Trish. Giorno and Bucciolati didn't want that, and they ended up betraying the boss, and that's what, ended up making Fugo leave and all this other stuff. So even though, like I said, the story was kind of, taking kind of like a lackluster path when you try to explain it to someone, when you look at all the little tiny things inside there, it was interesting. And this was one of them, where, the whole Trish and Diavolo's, story and whatnot, that was interesting. I feel Diavolo as a villain, I like him. I don't think he's better than Dio Brando though, and it's debatable if you think he's better than Kira Yoshikage. I personally don't think he's better than Kira Yoshikage, but I don't think he's bad. Is he better than Lord Cars? Man, I like Cars a lot. I don't think he's better than Cars either. But just because I don't think he's better than, honestly, any of the previous villains doesn't make him a bad villain. That just means I like him the least. Diavolo, I think he's still a pretty cool villain. But he had like this split personality also with another character called Doppio, and Doppio, he was, I don't know, maybe it was a pun on his name about him being dopey, but Doppio was just weird, and he didn't last long either. He had this thing where he would see an inanimate object and then he would start talking to it, where he's basically talking to Diavolo. At the time, I thought Doppio and Diavolo were two different people, and I thought that was like his ability, where he can use any inanimate object and talk to Diavolo at any given time or place. But then we find out this dude's he's just basically insane, and he's talking to Diavolo inside his head. Bizarre. That's all we can say. It's JoJo's. Just get over it. Doppio was weird, but he ended up dying with the whole. As far as I know, he died during the whole spirit swap thing. It just didn't work out for him when it came to swapping bodies. But speaking of character swapping bodies and that specific arc, Palunatif, a character from Stardust Crusaders Part 3. If you remember, at the end of Part 3, Palunatif said he was actually going off to France. And Palunatif was here. I was wondering if we were going to see Palunatif, and we got to see Palunatif. And Palunatif is the guy who basically explains to the main character and all of his crew about the origin of the arrows. And I did not see that coming. That was a really nice plot twist, as far as Palunatif being the guy to explain this to us. He's in a wheelchair. He's a lot older. He apparently fought Diavolo for a while back in the day. One thing I didn't understand though, as far as Palunatif, I have no clue why Palunatif during this whole 6 months, because remember, well, even I don't know how long Palunatif has been fighting Diavolo, because remember, there's a time skip between Part 3 and Part 4, and Palunatif left for France at the end of Part 3, so there was the time gap for Part 4, then there was a little of time gap for Part 5. So I don't know why through this entire time Palunatif decided to stay, MIA basically. He didn't even try to call Jotaro or anything when it came to this. No clue. They never, as far as I remember, they didn't necessarily explain why Palunatif never tried to contact Jotaro when it came to someone as dangerous as Diavolo. It didn't make sense to me as far as why he didn't do this. So that was my only irk as far as Palunatif, but it was great to see his return as a character. He's a lot older, so he didn't really act the same. He acted more like an intelligent old person when it came to giving us info dumps and knowledgeable information. But there was a plot twist when it came to Palunatif, and when they characters swap bodies, he actually swapped bodies with a stand slash animal, and it was a turtle called Coco Jumbo, and Coco Jumbo's he ended up swapping bodies with the turtle, and his body, by the time they swapped bodies, Palunatif's body was already all fucked up. He had, he didn't have a leg, he was in a wheelchair, he was about to die anyway. And spiritually, the turtle ended up dying in Palunatif's body. So technically, I almost thought that Araki skipped a part of JoJo's where an animal did not die. But I have to say, at least this was like the least brutal, because the turtle technically died spiritually. It didn't have any type of like animal abuse that we usually see in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And we all know all of the examples, and all the parts. Part 1, dog. Part 2, the squirrel. Part 3, Iggy. and a couple other dogs. Part 4, the turtle at the beginning, and a couple of dogs in the series. And I think there was a cat too. And then part 5, a turtle spiritually. Sure, debatable if you want to consider that, but I'm considering it. The turtle died spiritually. But that ended up leaving Paludatif in the turtle's body, and I was like, what the fuck? I guess from now on, Paludatif is a turtle, you know? And that was fucking weird as shit. Paludatif is now a turtle. I don't know how I felt about that. That was bizarre. I don't know how I feel about that one, but that was it. You know, Paludatif, he's a turtle. Koichi, you know what's weird about this, as far as the characters? I'm probably gonna put up a little picture too. Part 4 had a picture where it showed Giorno in the middle. It showed Jotaro, Josuke, and you know, and all of their stands. So Gold Experience, Crazy Diamond, and Star Platinum. And when you see this like cover picture, you're thinking, oh, eventually we're gonna see Jotaro and Josuke come into the picture. We saw a little bit of Josuke we saw a little bit of Jotaro at the beginning of part 5 when he was talking to Koichi, but we never got to see Josuke. Don't even know. I don't even know what Josuke is doing. Josuke's probably going to school, but man, that pissed me off when I saw that cover and I was like, ooh, we're gonna eventually see Josuke. We never got to see Josuke. That pissed me off. I was like, whatever. We didn't get to see Josuke. We focused on the new character, sure. But I just thought, man, why would Araki tease us with such a cover art? You know, like, technically Josuke doesn't even know about Giorno. So it just, that irked me. But that's enough about the character section. I felt the characters, I'd give the character section a 9 out of 10. So, in my opinion, I personally couldn't give it a 10 because of the whole Fugo thing, and I felt this main character, Joestar, I felt he was kind of weak. Honestly, probably the weakest out of all of the Joestars, so there's that. And then I felt that Araki, he just killed off just a little bit too many characters, but that's just my opinion. But it's still a 9. I still think it's a great roster of characters. I still think their backstory is great. And the character interactions were between the characters like Guido Mista and Naranza, and all of the character interactions that they had. Great. But that's the end of this this section. On to the next one. Alright, next section I want to talk about is the opinionated section, so enjoyment. This is going to be a quick section. So, like I said, enjoyment is something it's opinionated. So, I felt that I enjoyed this part a lot for part 5. Like I said, pacing and certain characters not getting enough shine and leaving early, that kind of irked my enjoyment here and there. And I felt like I said, certain arcs, like what's it called, Green and Oasis, I felt the arc was just, it was not that enjoyable, but it still had a lot of enjoyable, you know, scenes and characters. Another thing that I really liked about part 5 was the unique stance that part 5 brought to the table. Some of them include the turtle and his stand, where basically everyone can get inside his it's basically inside of like a dimension inside his like shell, and everyone is like, it was interesting to see that. It was really unique and bizarre. Another one is White Album, where his stand is basically works as an armor, and you can put the stand on him, and he can do basically like ice powers. And I was like, this is probably the first time we saw you know, someone put a stand on them like a suit. And I honestly, I want to see that more. We didn't see that anymore in part 5. Hopefully in part 6 or 7 or 8, because I'm gonna read those. Hopefully I get to see another stand that's like that. But I thought that was interesting as hell. I thought it was unique and cool, and I wanted to see more of it. Another cool stand is King Crimson. Even though, you know, from a time manipulation standpoint, it's kind of like the other ones. It's just doing something else as far as from time, where, you know, Dio was freezing, Killer Queen or Dio was freezing, Kira was rewinding, and his own is erasing. I felt the way that it was used was extremely confusing but unique. Honestly, I still kind of confused on how it works, because he used it in so many different ways where, there was one time where a bullet was about to hit him and he basically made himself like, what's the word I'm looking for? He made himself invulnerable for like a couple of seconds, and then the bullet went straight through him and hit, someone else. And he used that by like erasing the time that he was at. I was just like, it was weird. It was confusing too. So I was just like, maybe I'm just stupid and I just don't understand it. But that was weird. But it was cool, I guess. But his overall power, it was pretty OP, and the fight that he had with the main character at the end, I thought it was pretty cool. And like I said, the whole transformation as far as the main character and his gold experience. Is it golden experience or gold experience? Anyway, I'm just gonna call it golden experience right now. Yeah, the whole transformation that I had, that was cool, and their fight, that was really cool too. But that's it. I give this section an 8 out of 10. It's very good. My enjoyment, it could have been higher, but pacing and all that other stuff, I already explained that. But 8 is still very good, so I enjoyed it a lot. So the next section I want to talk about is the last section, my overall thoughts on it. So overall thoughts on part 5 is that it is a very good part. Out of all of the parts in comparison, I do think that this one is probably my least liked, though. But it's still a very good part. I know a lot of people, as far as I've seen, a lot of people actually don't really like part 5 that much. They either thought it was a bore fest, they thought it was, it dragged on too long, or it was just uninteresting altogether. Now, some of that is debatable. Like I said, I thought the main character was a little bit uninteresting, but that's about it as far as stuff that I would consider uninteresting about part 5. Yeah, all the negativity and controversy that part 5 gets, I don't think it's worth it, honestly. I think it's justified. I still think it's a very good part. If I had to rate part 5 out of 10, I would have to give it an 8 out of 10. An 8.25 to be exact. And basically when it comes to me giving it an 8.25, I'm basically taking every category, I'm adding them all up together and averaging them out. And that would give me an 8.25, basically. So that's how that's what I would give it out of 10, is an 8.25, which is still very good. Still, I do like part 5 a lot. Honestly, if I had to say my biggest con for part 5, it was probably Fugo. The fact that Fugo left. That irked me a lot. I probably can never forgive Araki for doing such a thing. Because, like I said, it felt like he was going to do it, but it felt like he got a little uninterested in part 5 around the end. Because if he was supposed to bring Fugo back, you would think that it probably would have lasted longer. And if he did that, this would probably be the longest part out of all of the parts. Because as of right now, as far as I know, part 4 is the longest with 174. This one has 155, and then part 6 I think has 152. So if he did do the whole Fugo thing, this probably would be the longest. But he didn't, so maybe he just was interested in wrapping up this part and moving on to the next one. But that is about it. I'm done. Like I said, 8.25 for JoJo's part 5, Vento Aureo. Very good part. I can't wait to start part 6. Probably gonna start reading it in a couple of days. Just wanted to get this review out before I started on part 6. But that is about it. Thank you for sticking around and watching the whole thing if you did. And I plan to do this for part 6 and part 7 also. And maybe if I do get caught up with part 8, probably do like maybe weekly. Or no, it's monthly now actually. As far as I heard, part 8 is monthly. So I might actually do chapter reviews. If I get caught up with part 8, I might do chapter reviews on that. That depends. But yeah, I enjoyed part 5. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Facebook. Friend me on Facebook. My anime list is in the description below also. I try to keep it updated, unlike some people. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching this video. Peace.